Hello, I'm Danny Boyle, director of 28 Years Later, and I'm here on Get Wrecked with Straw Hat Goofy.
That was good.
Is that all right?
That was great. I think you did. I think you did just fine, man.
Wake up, Juju. Time to go to work. All right. Can we talk about wake up, I get it, I get it, wake up, I get it, I go with everyone saying I'm up next. It's not my fault that the vocals are gold. They're making the haters so upset. My life is a movie, the way that I roll. They saying I'm goofy, but baby, you know I'm making everybody obsessed. Cause we the best, how we get wrecked, and I know we gonna get wrecked. 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 We gonna get wrecked.
Dude, it's so good to sit down with you and talk to you about this film. Like, I'm really excited to get into it.
Excellent.
All right, so now first,
Yeah.
obviously, as you said on the slate, we are on Get Wrecked with Straw Hat Goofy, and what I like to do is I like to get to know my guests from the movies that they love, from the movies that kind of like changed their brain chemistry,
Yeah.
that made them who they are.
Yeah.
I feel like you can learn a lot about people by
Yeah.
how they light up and talk about their favorite films. So I gotta ask you, what is a movie recommendation that you can give me right now?
So, well, weirdly, the most recent movie I watched was I watched Wicked on the plane. Because I missed it in the cinema, to my shame. I shouldn't really
Was this
watch
your
it.
first time seeing it on the plane?
Yeah, I'd missed it.
Okay.
I don't know why, and it was really good.
Yeah.
And the two of them are amazing.
Yo,
I
my
think.
God, like,
And Ariana Grande is very funny.
listen,
Properly funny.
yes.
You know, like, it really knows how to do it, you know? And Cynthia is excellent. So I was very impressed by that.
Okay,
So.
I've seen Wicked, but I will see it again off your recommendation because I do love that movie very much.
But no, seriously, so I'm a twin. I have a twin sister.
I have a twin brother.
Do you?
I do.
So what was the first movie? What was the first? Did you go to the movies together?
Of course.
But but the first time?
First time we went to the movies together, my aunt took us. I remember, okay, I'll tell you my first memory because like I might get the years mixed up, but it was Tarzan.
Was it?
Tarzan. It was either Tarzan or Mulan, whichever one came first.
Yeah.
And we were obsessed with that movie. I think it was my first movie, and it was also the first movie that I saw like twice.
Wow,
in the movie theater.
there you go.
So yeah, but what was your movie?
So I have a twin sister, and so when we were 11, on our 11th birthday, my dad took me to see this war movie called Battle of the Bulge.
Okay.
And it's significant because it's
Putting this
related. It's related to 28 Years Later in a weird way.
Okay.
So he took me to see Battle of the Bulge, and my mum took my sister to see Sound of Music. Okay. So there's gender stereotyping right there, right from the get-go. And that was the first time I'd ever been in a cinema, and I was 11 years old. Because it wasn't. We come from quite a kind of like what you call a blue-collar background, so
right.
we did. And cinema in Britain isn't like cinema in America, so it was a big treat to go.
Right.
Anyway, it's shot. Not that I knew it at the time, but it's shot in a format called 276,
okay.
which is proper widescreen format. And we've shot, and there's not many movies shot in it. Like Hateful Eight shot in it.
Yeah.
And Oppenheimer was shot in it. It's
And
sort of an
recently
IMAX.
had like Sinners shot in it, right?
And Sinners is shot in it, and which was a wonderful movie. And anyway, we shot 28 Years Later in that same format, and it's quite. There's not that many films shot in it like that. So that was a wonderful experience. So I don't know whether it's worth going back to Battle of the Bulge for the whole movie, but I remember bits of it. You know, I remember these burning oil tanks, these kind of like cans of oil burning and being sent at the tanks and things like that.
That's
Anyway.
incredible, man. Yeah. See, now I know a lot of people, a lot of our audience will be going to see Battle of the Bulge just off of your recommendation, which is why we have the show.
So it was directed by a guy called Ken Anakin.
Okay.
And that's where George Lucas got the name Anakin for.
No.
Yeah, that's where he got it from. Yeah, from Ken Anakin.
I heard some people in the back just go, "What?" We got some Star Wars fans in the building. Yeah. I love this, man. Well, thank you for giving me that. Now I'm gonna give you a little fun fact. You said you were surprised about Ariana Grande like being so funny.
Yeah.
I grew up watching her on this show called Victorious. It was like this Nickelodeon kid show. It was a comedy.
Right.
And she plays this character called Cat Valentine. And she's like this kind of like ditzy kind of character, doesn't really know what's going on, but she's like, everyone's a comedic relief in the show, but she is the funniest one in the show so much.
You knew she was funny.
I
you
knew.
Weren't surprised.
As soon as she was cast as Glinda, I was like, this is perfect for her. This is like absolutely kind of Cat Valentine, but just a little elevated, right? And so we loved her so much that she got a spinoff show just with her and this other character.
Wow.
So we who grew up with Victorious, we knew how great she was going to be, and she got an Oscar nomination for it.
So she does this wonderful, kind of like with her hair. And then,
that was pretty good.
But it's the progression of her character as she does it.
Yeah.
And as their friendship grows is beautiful. I thought
it makes me so excited for Wicked for Good, man. It
Yeah,
makes me so excited to see because I hadn't watched the Broadway production of it. I haven't seen it on the stage, so watching the movie was my first introduction to that. And so watching that story play itself out, not in full, in the half, obviously, it blew me away. Like my publicist, Paul, right there, I was right next to him. I was like, I just saw something transformative. Like, what is this? And like, I just fell in love with their performance. I fell in love with the music, the production design. Like, that movie is just fantastic. So I'm glad that you got to see it. I hope you make time to go to the theater to see Wicked for Good.
I will.
So,
I will,
definitely. Get it on the big screen, man.
Yeah.
All right, so
Yes.
let's talk about your movie. Like, thank you for telling me about that. But let's take it a step back, and I want to talk a little bit about 28 Days Later, which changed the game when it comes to like infected and, you know, how do we like see these monsters. And you are someone who kind of like introduced the world to fast-moving infected, which, as I understand, like Alex kind of walked up to you and said, hey, let's try this thing, because you kind of felt that zombies are a little like daft and like whatever, but
Alex Garland, who wrote it, and he's a fantastic filmmaker, and he's a big zombie fan. He likes zombie movies. I wasn't sure about zombie movies because I always had this thing, which is a bit stupid. I thought, well, you could just run
Walk away.
You could just kind of like just speed up a little bit and you could get away from them. And so that's not the point, obviously, about them, but that's sort of what I felt. So yeah, when we came to this, we tried to think about doing it in a different way, and I did this incredible thing, which is I remembered that I'd had I was in a relationship with a dancer once. Like, this was a long time ago.
Yeah, you said she was a ballerina, right?
Ballerina. And it was weird because I'd never known somebody who lived through their body so much. Just their concentration was in their body, not up here and out here like we are tend to be. Well, I don't know. You may be a dancer anyway. But
I dance. I'm not a dancer. I can get on the floor, but I can't.
Anyway, I thought, well, what about? So we started thinking about athletes then.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And we started, and everybody said you can't get athletes because they're just on such strict timetables getting ready for the Commonwealth Games or the Olympic Games or the World Championships or whatever it is. It's very intensive for their training and everything like that. And then somebody told us about this agency in East London for retired athletes whose careers were over. Because for a lot of athletes, it's over at 30.
Right.
You know, it just gets younger and younger.
Especially because they put a lot of their time into honing their bodies.
And they get wrecked and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, but there was this agency, and it gave them jobs, like they'd fly them out to Dubai to turn some somersaults and cut a ribbon to open a supermarket and things like that.
Okay.
So I went along to this agency, and they got all these athletes in, and I did this workshop with them. And I said to them, like the crew are gathered there, I said, okay, attack me. And I said, as violently as you can.
Okay.
But you've not got to hurt me. You've got to stop at the last second and not hurt me. So I was very clear about that.
Okay, I mean, anyway, you're walking a line. I'm just saying.
They came at me. It was absolutely terrifying. And I remember thinking, that's it. That's what we'll do. It's because you can't get away.
Yeah.
Because they're moving so fast. They feel so powerful.
Right.
And they're so infected with this feeling of wanting to hurt you that you'd stand no chance. Most people would stand no chance. Or you'd have to think of other things to protect yourself.
Right.
So that was the idea. So we sped up the infected, and we call them the infected rather than zombies, so that people wouldn't get the wrong idea about them. So that was the idea for that film.
Well, that's what I find fascinating about them, right? It's because like where you have zombies, they're kind of decaying. They just kind of like eat because it's like something in their brain function that's telling them to do it.
Yeah.
But you know, they could just essentially live forever. Whereas like the infected in your film, like they can die, they can starve, they can, you know. But they also. I gotta tell you about this scary ass moment that happened when I watched 28 Days Later, and it's in the church scene. It's like our first introduction to the infected, and you know, Cillian Murphy like says hello after seeing like this kind of like pile of dead bodies, and then you see two people just kind of like get up.
Yeah, that's right.
And just they're staring at him, right? Yeah. And you could tell there's this thought process in their eyes where they're not necessarily like lumbering zombies who are just going off of instinct. They're just kind of like food, and they're trying to figure him out just as much as he's trying to figure it out. And that right there to me separated zombies from infected. I said, this is a different thing, right? And that's what I love about like your versions of, you know, infected people in this. But that being said, you know, obviously people will still associate this with zombies, and a lot of filmmakers will kind of like, you know, take this and Train to Busan, Dawn of the Dead, which was made 2 years later by Zack Snyder, right? You have all these fast-moving zombie movies that I would say were inspired by 28 Days Later. Did you think that people were going to follow suit, or did you think this was going to be a cool one-off type of thing?
Oh, you never think people's going to follow suit because you're just you're all in for just one thing, really. It's you're not thinking about anything else other than trying to make the one thing work. I think it did kind of obviously trigger a fascination in people, but I think it was slightly different, and it wasn't necessarily to do with our movie. The world had changed because while we were shooting it, 9/11 happened, and I think that changed people in a way that we still find hard to appreciate. And I think it was to do with cities, that suddenly cities, which look to us to be, because I come from outside a city and I moved into a city, you know, when I got old enough, when I became 18, I'd moved to a city, you know, like you do and stuff like that. And they always felt like incredibly powerful things that you could kind of like disappear inside and nobody knew what you were doing, you know, and all that kind of, and suddenly they felt vulnerable after 9/11. They felt fearful. And how can a city be fearful? And I think we benefited from that. Suddenly there was this feeling of scared, and I think that's one of the reasons that the genre became so popular, and it span off into TV shows and all sorts of stuff like that, because it expressed, as horror does, it expressed the fear that people have and that they could hook onto, and then you get COVID and all those kind of things that all feed into it as well, like that. And cities feel suddenly. Do you remember when we emptied out the cities in COVID?
Yeah.
And you're thinking, and you look around.
You look out the window, it's just
it was
nobody.
like a scene from 28 Days Later. It was like, this is crazy.
Yeah, it's the themes of isolation is so heavy in these films, and it's getting even heavier in 28 years. Like when I saw the trailer, and also just kind of like, you know, reading your interviews and listening to you talk about it. But I'm glad that you brought up kind of, you know, this being made, 28 days being made after 9/11, but now 28 years is being made after COVID, like a post-pandemic that we had. Yeah. What is it about kind of those real world parallels that make these type of like isolation stories so palpable? Because I feel like 28 Days Later got a new audience once the pandemic happened, because they said this is exactly how we're feeling, right? So like and making this film after, you know, a pandemic of our own, is this still in your mind of like, wow, like we had 9/11 and now we have like a new pandemic and now I'm making this film? Do you feel like the world's talking to you in a way?
You don't do it directly, but it does influence you hugely. And I think a lot of it's to do with, a lot of people think, how would I survive? They think about that. It's always cool, like when you're a kid, when you're playing and you hunker down and
of course,
make a camp
making the tree fort and everything,
and all
like
that
the
kind
pillows.
of stuff. And it's really an extension of that. I think, how would I actually, would I be able to live? Would I be able to survive?
Yeah.
And how would I go about it? And our story is set on this tidal causeway island, which is protected by the tide, other than at certain moments at low tide when they have to protect it. And that's how that particular community has survived. And it's shrunk to the ideal size for a community, which is about, apparently, this is all provable, there's about 150 people is about the ideal size for a community, because you can remember everybody's names, and therefore you have trust, because you know everybody. You can learn them all. Whereas above that number, you start to have a different system to trust. And you all put your money, your trust in money as a system, or you put your trust in religion as a system that you all observe and obey, and therefore you trust everybody else who also obeys that system as well. But before that, and none of that's available to these people because they literally are alone, and there's no money anymore, of course. Their size is about 150 people. And our story is about this boy who goes out with his father for his first kill, for literally like a blooding, because he has to learn how to protect the island, which is what he's doing at the beginning.
That's a hell of a coming of age story, man.
Coming of age,
you know,
absolutely.
wow. Like usually when I think of coming of age, I think of, you know, nice and sweet, get a girlfriend, go to school.
This is a bit tougher.
It's a little bit tougher.
This is a bit tougher than that. Don't come expecting that.
Go kill your first infected, man. It's gonna be cool. It's gonna be cool. Just one last question I have about 28 28 Days, and then we'll like fully, because I have a lot of questions about 28 Years, especially when it comes to the infected and their evolution.
Yeah.
But in 28 Days, I found it funny that one of the masters of horror, one of the masters in like the zombie movie, George Romero, like, I remember reading something where he kind of didn't like the fast moving zombie infected craze. And, and I wonder, I don't know if you've looked up to him or if like, you're like a big fan of him, but do you think there's usually a resistance from old filmmakers, old Hollywood, to kind of like do something new, especially since you've done something that a lot of other filmmakers have kind of like taken suit and just kind of like ran with it? No pun intended.
Yeah. You've always got to watch out for it, especially people my age getting protective or defensive about stuff.
Yeah.
The amazing thing about cinema is I always think of it as vampiric. It wants blood, new blood.
Yes.
It wants your blood. It wants young people with new ideas, because its primary audience still is young people. It's it's going out with a girl or a mate or whatever it is, and you go to the movies and it wants fresh ideas. And I think that's one of the things that separates it from television. I really do, and there's all this talk these days about streaming and, is it going to replace cinema? And it mustn't, because there's something about that ritual of the cinema space, and you go there, and it's cruel, because if it's no good, they'll let you know. They'll be seriously disappointed.
Yeah, I mean, people are going like and spending time in the theater and spending all this money to do it. They're expecting to get something.
They want something new and fresh and different. Anyway, that was one of the principles behind why we didn't want to just make a straight sequel that just kind of just followed the first film.
Yeah.
This is, you don't need to have seen the first film to have seen this film.
Yeah.
It's a standalone idea in its way. There's definitely benefits if you have seen the first film and know a bit about it. But it's an original idea and an original story from one of our great minds, Alex Garland. He was one of our wonderful story writers.
He's killing it right now, man.
Yeah.
We'll get to more Alex like towards the end of this interview, because his movies like that he's been directing has been just like balls to the wall, like amazing. But when you talk about evolution from 28 Days to 28 Years, I see it, right? Because, you have infected that you've described as being more evolved, like animals, and how they've kind of adapted to kind of like being around. Talk to me more about the infected in this movie and how they kind of like have changed, how they're like a little bit different than most people will remember them.
So everybody remembers that if you remember the first film, you remember these pretty, not emaciated looking, but they're pretty basic looking, ferocious movement, infected with this terrible rage. The red mist of rage permanently occupies them. And we imagined that the virus itself had mutated within them, and it had mutated both ways. There'd been those who had withdrawn from that incredible expression of energy, exhausting expression of energy, and had literally gone to ground, had literally and now fed off the ground itself, and literally became almost part of the ground. And those beyond, and then it went the other way as well, which is that these things called alphas emerged, which are bigger and more dangerous, and we're not allowed to show what they do.
Yeah.
You have to go to the
cinemas.
cinemas. You have to go to the cinemas to see what they do. But it is a progression of beyond. So in the first film, it's about getting infected, and you turn into one of them, and you start,
Right.
It's a bit of a progression from that, I'm afraid.
I mean, it seems from the trailer, and again, like I've been following this movie very closely. It seems from the trailer and kind of like what you've been saying of like, these infected. It seems that they're almost like a clan a little bit. There's like the scene in the trailer where they're like on the horizon and they're just kind of there standing, and it's almost like they're hunting in a way, and you don't have to spoil anything if you don't want to.
No, but
that's
smart.
You could tell they've gotten smarter. You could tell that they're living here. This is their land now. Like the whole of Europe seems to be the wasteland that they occupy. And there's this thing that you said where you said that you filmed the movie in a way that makes you feel like you're surrounded by the infected, that they could just be anywhere.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that filming technique, because from 28 Days to now, I feel like 28 Days had this kind of like surreal, like you're on the ground, it's very gritty, feels very guerrilla, and you shot that on like digital, so it feels like it's, I believe as you described it, just good enough to where it has the look and feel. But here, like now, you know, we have these beautiful wide angles where like you don't know where to look, you don't know where they're coming from.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the decision to kind of like employ that filming style.
It was because it like the first film is set in a city. This is very much set in the countryside, if you like.
Yeah.
And the idea was to capture as much of it as possible, and they could be anywhere in your widescreen view. So that the unease, which came from being very jittery in the first film and very gritty, this is to do with much more being able to see this landscape, which has changed enormously because man hasn't been putting its fingerprints on it for 28 years. But the danger could be anywhere out there within that. So that we shot in that format that's, that, like you said, Sinners uses as well, and what was the other film? The Creator. The Creator.
Oh my beautiful!
Which was a beautiful widescreen film, wasn't it? I love that.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway,
I think it won Best Visual Effects for that too.
Yes, it did.
Yeah, Best Visual Effects.
And rightly so. That scene of the
the
kind of
thing
laser things just mapping the sea out in those scenes. That was
Oh my gosh!
fantastic.
It reminded me of his earlier film, Rogue One, the Star Wars film.
Yes,
like
yeah,
you know,
that's
it
right.
also has like that beautiful kind of like landscapes to
here's
it.
a look. Yeah,
I do
it's
it.
beautiful.
So we can expect to see that in 28 years. I'm thinking.
Yeah, it's good. There's a bit. Anyway, yeah, it's very So they can come at you from anywhere, really. That's the idea of it. But you touched on something really interesting. It's really smart what you picked up from the horizon shot where they appear to gather, because they're random in the first film. There's no clanship.
Right.
Whereas this feels more like it hints towards they're more like that they are slightly organised, that they have survived. And like some of them haven't survived. There's one very thin guy that you see in the trailer, who's clearly on his
last legs.
Yeah, last legs. But others have organised so that they can feed, so that they can survive. And that's the instinct that's in all of us, whether you're full of rage or not, is that survival instinct. And even more than that, they kind of appear to be organised by this other figure that's significantly larger than them, and that's the alpha. And you meet two of them in the. I shouldn't have been given that away. There you go. I'm not going to give anything away.
I'll stop you right there at that part. But I do find this extremely interesting because, again, with the heavy things of like isolation and kind of like, you know, them being quarantined and what happens when the countries and other nations from the outside are just kind of like leaving them to their own devices, right? And saying, you're on your own, we can't help you. But then within that, the people who are infected are banding together and they see the importance of kind of like, we need each other in order to even feed, right? Yeah. So I find like all these things working together is just very, very fascinating.
It's very true. Nature finds a way. Is that you think you can kind of like just lock the island down and kind of just let it kind of eradicate itself. Yeah. But it will find a different way of going of that. And there's a scene which I can't tell you about, and you have to go to the cinema to see. There's a scene later on where something happens, and you know they are continuing to evolve. Okay. Really. That's all I can say about that.
Okay. You're trying really hard not to spoil it, and I love it. But this is what I love,
under very strict instructions.
But this is what I love. Like the light that you're showing, just talking about like creating this film, like it shows whenever you like audiences go and they see it. Like you could tell when someone's heart is not in it, and your heart is very, very clearly in it.
Well, it's family. One of the things that's interesting. So I said to Alex when he first gave us the script, I said, well, you know, when we talked about it, I said, what's it about then? And he said, because we made this other film. So we shot this first film, and we've shot a second film.
Bone Temple.
Yeah, Bone Temple, which Nia DaCosta's directed. And they're linked, very closely linked through character, and they're continuous. So you don't have to have seen one to see the other. They're independent films in a way, but they are linked, very closely linked. And I said, what's the definition of them? He said, the first one is really the nature of family, which is a weird thing to say about a horror movie, but it is about the nature of family. Maybe not so weird. Families can be pretty horrible, as we know.
True, we've seen it.
The first one is about the nature of family, and what you referred to about the gathering on that hillside is also to do with family. And he meets a family at the end. This kid meets a family at the end that's a very strange thing and features Jack O'Connell, who's in Sinners. He's the chief vampire in Sinners.
We're going to be really excited about that.
He's an amazing actor.
Yeah, he's awesome.
And he travels into the second film, and the second film's about the nature of evil. So you get this balance between them, which is really interesting. So there are ideas in it that are new and ambitious, and you will have to go to the cinemas to see them.
Okay, I will see them in a sense for sure. All right, so I want to hit one more point on the shooting technique of this film. Yeah. So I've been hearing conversations around the internet that this entire film was shot on iPhone cameras. Can you confirm or debunk that right now? Because I've seen like your rig, it looks insane. I want to get that for my phone, hopefully, so my TikToks will look a lot better. But can you confirm or deny, or like kind of like deny, like whether or not that's true?
So we used a lot. We used an array of different cameras for it.
Yeah.
And the iPhone was one of them, and we used them for those rigs that you've seen some photographs. They've released some pictures of those rigs. Which,
that rig is insane. The one that like goes around.
I know.
Like,
but it's basically the Matrix. It's a poor man's version of bullet time from the Matrix.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, from Keanu and those amazing shots.
Right.
And we wanted something that startled you about the way that the alpha particularly is depicted. And so that's what we use it for. And it's a shot they can't put in any of the trailers because of its content.
Yeah.
So it has to.
Of course. Because of its content. That could be so many things.
Yeah. But we use that. But we also use all these other cameras. Like there's a very weird Panasonic camera used, and these shots are in the trailer. The red. These red shots of them filmed at night, these kind of heat, they're sort of almost like a heat camera at night, but they're kind of, it's a red filter thing that they use on this, it's called the EU123 Panasonic. Okay. And so there's some very sophisticated cameras used as well. So it's what they call a smorgasbord, I believe is the word of all sorts of different cameras that are used. But we did want to use some of the everyday technology that we all have, because that was the idea in the first film, is that we shot it on domestic video cameras because we thought, well, they'd be around. You know, if the apocalypse happened, they'd be lying in the street at the time, just like iPhones would be now. You know, and you could pick them up, and if you could get in them, they'd probably have a depiction of what was happening or evidence of things that would be either terrifying or very moving, stuff like that. So it felt like we had an obligation to kind of reflect that, but the technology has moved on so much now that when you use these things, they shoot at 4K, which is just incredible quality anyway. So it was, and it gave us a wonderful lightness and flexibility about being able to travel to parts of Britain that people haven't seen before, and which you don't want a camera crew trampling on. So we use a lot of drones as well, and I think drones are coming more and more into our lives. They're going to be delivering stuff, they're going to be recording stuff, they're going to be following you around.
It's
like,
a lot.
So the opportunity of the 28 world is that you can use technology that's kind of evolving in front of us to capture these stories. So
that makes a lot of sense. Now I'm over here hoping that like I can get that rig from my iPhone so I can make my TikToks look amazing.
It's worth it. It's a really lovely thing as well. Anyway, you'll see. There's this shot of the Alpha where he drops down in this train.
Yeah.
Anyway, you'll know it when you see it. When you see that shot, you'll think, oh, that's what he meant, that shot like that. And it is cool, that shot. And I don't say that about my own work, but that is kind of like, wow.
When I see that at the premiere, I'm gonna run up to your seat in the middle of the movie and say, "That's what you were talking about." Then run back. That's what's gonna happen. All right. So I want to like talk about how you've reunited with Alex Garland, who you've worked with very closely on the first film, and now you guys are. I think a lot of people are happy that you two are back together with this film, right? I feel like a lot of people have been waiting on this. Can you talk to me about kind of like seeing his journey from kind of like, you know, novelist to screenwriter to now he's directing. I mean, he just had a 1-2 punch of Warfare and Civil War back to back. And now he's also going to do the Elden Ring movie as well. Like, as a colleague, as a friend, can you talk to me about like seeing him kind of like succeed in that way and watching his films?
So a friend of mine, who's actually in this movie.
Really?
He plays Sam, this older guy in the movie. He's an actor. He's called Chris Fulford.
Okay.
And we've been mates for like donkey's years. And he gave me this book about 25 years ago or something. He gave me this book called The Beach. He said, "You should read this. It's really good." And I read it, and it was really good. And I was like, and nobody knew about it at the time. It was on a very small print run, and it just kicked off. So we bought the rights for it, and we met Alex, and he was clearly a cinematic writer, because his novels, and there's a number of them, are written in a very cinematic way. And so we met, and he came out to Thailand when we were filming The Beach and just watched a bit and stuff like that, and was obviously observing. He didn't adapt it.
Right.
John Hodge, who's the regular guy I work with, kind of adapted it. Anyway, he got the taste for it, and then he produced this very, very thin little script, and it said 28 days later on it.
Right.
And I remember at the time thinking, we can't call it that. there's a Sandra Bullock movie just come out called 28 Days, and everybody will get it confused. And they'll turn up thinking they're going to watch a Sandra Bullock romantic comedy. And it's going to be this thing of people tearing each other apart. So, but thankfully we didn't change the title because everybody's forgotten about the Sandra Bullock movie now. And we've done all right. We've managed to survive. It's survival technique. Anyway, and he was wonderful to work with. So we started working on it. And he loved collaborating on the script, you know, he loved kind of like, he writes in such a cool way, doesn't over-describe things, he just writes them very simply, lets you just kind of reach into it yourself rather than be told everything that you're expected to
I love that
picture.
about his movies, I love that.
And then, and he, it was clear that he wanted to direct, I think, when he learnt enough. So we worked with a number of different people, realised we were all rubbish, and thought, oh, I could do this myself.
Right.
Now he realises how tough a job it is.
He proved himself.
He's got a lot of time for now, like directors' complaints rather than the other way, rather than complaining about directors. So yeah, no, he's great, and and his first film. So one of my theories is that. Your first film is always your best film. The other films may be more successful, they may be more admired, they may be more technically brilliant or whatever, but your first film is always your best film because you don't know what you're doing. And if you survive, rather than get massacred, it's gonna be quite interesting to see that. And his first movie was Ex Machina, and he'll be hard pressed to make a better movie than that in his career. Because it's a wonderful movie.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful movie.
I still think about the disco scene in that movie, to be honest. Get Down Saturday Night was on my playlist for years after that movie. And every time I talk to someone about that movie, I say, hey, I'm not gonna say anything about this movie. Just watch this disco scene. They're like, "Oh, this looks nice."
So, because you were saying about recommendations, if anybody hasn't seen if anybody watches your show hasn't seen the first Coen Brothers movie, it's called Blood Simple.
Okay.
And the Coen Brothers are geniuses, and they've made some great films.
We know,
but they have never made a film as great as Blood Simple.
Okay.
If you want to watch, because they made it for nothing, and they clearly were just learning how to do it as you do it. So it's a wonderful thing to watch if you want to do it yourself. If that's what you're interested in.
Right.
Watching people's first films gotta be good.
Yeah.
Because you're not overreaching then, you know. Because when you get you know, if your films work and you get famous or whatever, everybody surrounds you with all these kind of experts and stuff like that. It's much better looking at what you actually when you're just working it out yourself.
Right.
So I made this film, Shallow Grave. That was my first film.
Was that your best film?
So my dad, God bless him, he's dead now, but my dad used to go to all my films, and he'd say, and he'd come out of them, he'd say, yeah, it was good. But it wasn't as good as Shallow Grave.
Oh,
that's what he said about every film that he saw of mine.
Okay.
He said the same thing, yeah. Which I think was to keep me in my place.
Right.
Understandably. Yeah.
Right. Is that where your theory kind of came from? Like
partly, yeah.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah. Well, as we wrap this up, and as we are giving Alex Garland his flowers, what do you think? do you really think that that's his best film, Ex Machina, or do you have a favorite film, or do you consider best and favorite to be two separate things?
They often are, aren't they? Cause
I think so.
Yeah, they often are different.
Yeah.
You know, people admire films, and films are huge successes, but you always have your favourite. My favourite filmmaker remains. I mean, my favourite film has always been Apocalypse Now.
Yeah.
It's just and I can watch that film, and I have watched that film multiple times over the years. And if anybody on your crew hasn't seen it, I'm sure they've all seen it.
I'm sure we've all seen Apocalypse Now, I'm hoping.
But I love this British director called Nick Rogue. And he made a film, and he's he's passed away recently, sadly, starring Gene Hackman, called Eureka, which is one of those films that's disappeared. It's just vanished. And if you can get a hold of a copy of it and watch it, the first half of Eureka, it's about this man, played by Gene Hackman, who has literally discovered liquid gold. He is the richest man. He has everything. And what more could he want? If you see the film, you'll see.
I'll check it out.
It's just extraordinary. He's a brilliant filmmaker, and a non-literal filmmaker. He kind of follows images and ideas, and yet he still remains within the mainstream. His most famous film is Don't Look Now, I think. Which is with Julie Christie and Donald Sutherland, who also passed away quite recently. But that's worth watching as well. That's an amazing film.
Well, we're on that. Well, Thank you, Danny Boyle, for coming to talk to me on Get Wrecked, man.
Are we done? Are we done?
We're done. We got the little 5, and I'm clocking that over here. So, dude, this was such an amazing conversation. I hope to talk to you more about Alex, this film, and any other movies you got for me, because that was amazing.
Oh, fun. Thank you very much. Great.
Nice. Well, guys, thank you so much for watching Get Wrecked with Straw Hat Goofy. Make sure you guys go on Substack, and then it will come out later on your Spotify's, your Apples, YouTubes, wherever you watch your podcast. I'm Juju Green. This is Danny Boyle, and we'll catch you next time when you make me your movie guy.